Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us as we host a virtual town hall to reimagine school counseling in Long Beach Unified, but also throughout the state. We have interpretation services available as well. I am Amir Whitaker. I'm with the ACLU of Southern California, one of the organizations hosting this, but we also have colleagues with Children's Defense Funds, public advocates, Safer LBUSD, and our partners at the California Association of School Counselors. I want to start by acknowledging the land that we're on, that we are still on indigenous land from throughout LA County, whether it's Tongvalan, Gabrielino, Fool's Day, and the attacks on this community that happened in Los Angeles. Next, I want to read the biography of a panelist who's joining us. We are really fortunate to be in solidarity in this movement and fighting for our students and fighting for our counselors with the California Association of School Counselors. And we're joined by Dr. Loretta Whitson, who's the executive director. So Dr. Whitson is responsible for CASC, or California Association of School Counselor Operations, and has devoted her life work to advancing the school counseling profession. She works closely with state leaders, legislators, journalists, and advocates like us, clarifying complex educational issues, and she's a champion of policies and practices to support school counseling throughout California. For over 20 years, Dr. Whitson was the director of student support services in Monrovia Unified, where she oversaw the school counseling program, as well as several other district level operations. She also served as an assistant professor and the chair of the educational counseling program for the University of La Verne, and was a visiting professor for over 10 years at Cal State Northridge. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Whitson.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And I must say that this is just such a timely moment, so in school counseling, if you just mark it off from all the years of what has happened, we can kind of do a little check. This happened here, and we can see the elements of that now. And now, I think we'll look back and say, oh my gosh, look what happened in 2022, 2021, and 2022, 2023, and forward. And I have to give it up to Amir because Dr. Whitaker, because I don't think you got the appropriate, I don't have your bio, but I have to say that, Amir, I just can't let you just take it and not tell them what a wonderful advocate he's been for mental health and for not only just school counselors, but school social workers and school psychologists, and how we met in LA Unified over the metal detectors. And from there, that was 2017 or 18, but really spurred on some of the work we were doing, just by saying we're partnering on Mental Health Week, we're partnering on this, and we're creating these documents together and doing the assessments and the surveys and the research that has carried us in so many different ways. So I just thank you, Amir, publicly for all that you did. I didn't get this chance at the conference to say that, but thank you. And yeah, and the same thing with Long Beach. Been watching what's been going on in Long Beach, and it's phenomenal. It was about time. It was needed. And I think there has been a circle of support from some of these organizations around you that I think are pretty wonderful, not only the ACLU. And if I started mentioning the children, if I started going through it, I probably would miss someone, but you know who they are. And I just think this, if anything has taught us about now, is that capitalize on the moment, and it takes a village to do this work together. And that's what's been happening, including passages of 6 bills last year. So wow. Yeah, it was amazing. And all of those, either we were sponsoring or supporting those legislations that we thought were really good for the school counseling profession. So.
That's beautiful. Yes, we met over 4 years ago doing advocacy. And one thing I learned from you and saw in practice is that counselors are advocates, in their training, but also in their practice. And we really thank you and appreciate your support in speaking up for students and fighting criminalization. And you mentioned that it takes a village. So in June, you all also were in support of the organizations and the school counselors in Long Beach when we drafted a letter and submitted it to Long Beach Unified to the school board, and we had some meetings planned, and those meetings were still happening and different things, but those are some of the issues that were talked about in the legislation that passed this year. And we want to talk about that AB 2508, which is a historic landmark legislation that you pushed for that Governor Newsom just signed a few months ago. Could you tell us about this and how it changes?
Sure. Yeah, well, let me put it in perspective. When Governor Newsom signed this bill, he did it in a public signing ceremony in Fresno. At that time, he had over 800 bills on his desk, and not all of them got that kind of attention. Only a very few. I don't know what the percentage is, but that, and when he spoke about not only signing this legislation because it was landmark and it really was updating the ed code where we really needed it, but it was also having to do with bringing more school counselors into the workforce and the workforce issues and what he's doing for that, and the team in Sacramento. So, and it's a part of Governor Newsom's 3-point plan. School counselors are there. So that's another big secret. But how this changes things, and it'll change, what we're hoping is not only for California, but it will change the nation too. And where we moved in this legislation was more mental health language in it. We cleaned up all the other stuff, but we kept with the college and career, social emotional learning, the academic, but we also tried to spell that out because a lot of times we believe as an association that social emotional was something that was at the turn of the century when I was involved with all this. We used it because it wasn't being done at all. And then it grew to where school teachers and everyone, it should be doing it, parents, everyone. So we realized that then our counterparts are like clinicians and stuff, the government people didn't think that we really did mental health, even though we had the same language like individual counseling, group counseling, counseling theories, all that we learned in school. That's mental health services, is mental and behavioral health. So that's what is brand new in that. And from there, we're taking, and we also had new PPS training standards. So those two together, it's very much a part of our strategic plan. The next step that we're starting in December is writing standards, so that from the standards that will go along with this new language, professional standards, that will give to you the ability to have things like performance evaluations, job descriptions, that based on the standards. So it's a way of interpreting all of this into very distinct areas so that we are all on the same page. And so we're hoping that we'll get us all on the same page, right? So, right. So that's what's so exciting. And everyone knows about this bill. I mean, the governor talking about it and knowing about the bill, right? It's quite amazing. I mean, it really is.
As if, we didn't have to fight to make them do it, right? But it's happy that we can all celebrate it now, but we know it was a long time coming. And your time in the profession, you've seen the evolution a bit, right? Because I remember sometimes you'll tell me about some of the advocacy you were doing when Schwarzenegger was the governor, and before we had categoricals, and they were able to devote millions more to counseling. Could you talk some about just some of the trends you've seen in school counseling? Like, what were the ratios probably 20 years ago compared to now, even though California is still at the bottom of the barrel nationwide, but how far we've come?
Well, I'll tell you what spurred, I don't get to tell this story very much, but I think what spurred me into advocacy, I've thought about it a lot. I thought, why am I doing this? What has been my motivation over the years? And I started in the profession really about 1990 officially. But when I went to my first national conference, I was told that we don't really talk to California because their ratios are so high. We don't include them because it wasn't that we were the last with over 1,000 to 1. We were not, and dead last. We were far above everyone else. I think the second in line had 700 to 1. So we had 300 more students. We weren't even doing counseling as they would say. And I guess I felt a sense of like embarrassment. And I thought we shouldn't let that happen. We should change things. It was and people didn't, and then on a national level, they just didn't think it was possible because we had been at that level for so long and there had been no advocacy prior to us starting our association CASC in 2000. So the benchmarks also were like the AB 1802, which is a budget trailer bill that was signed into law, $200 million for school counselors. And that was in 2006. And we saw a definite hiring. About 2,500 school counselors were hired at that time. So that reduced our ratios. We then had a recession. So we went up a little bit, and then we started. And then I think one of the most clandestine kind of bill that was passed, and I was the only association, a professional education association that worked on this, which was with Senator Steinberg, who was the Senate pro tem at the time. He was retiring. And he passed the LCAP LCFF. And we were the only association in education working on that to get that passed, because we felt that one of the barriers for effectiveness was the fact that we were measured as schools on one standardized test. And if we were having multiple measures that had to do with climate and attendance and some of the work that we do, that would organically increase the number of school counselors. And we've seen a steady adding of school counselors since that time. And then, and of course, we've just advocated for it in many other different ways. But I think that kind of captures it. So,
yeah, and that's why we need those standards, right? You can't evaluate school counselors with the same metrics as teachers and others, right? There are other ways you can see the impact of school counselors, because we know you all are evidence-based ways to support student success. So we had a video that we wanted to share, but we don't have time now. But the link to the video is included in the PowerPoint presentation that we'll provide. But we recommend that you all check out CASC's materials. They have a lot of materials that can help educate folks, administrators, policymakers on the impact of counselors. So that's the link there. And those are also just some links of us at your conference over the years. My colleague Victor there in the picture that says all students deserve access to school counselors. It's their civil right. So as a concluding thought, Dr. Whitson, can you just share why school counseling and access to school counselors is a civil rights issue and not just extra supportive icing on the cake that we can have for some students?
I think it's as equally as important as instructional services. So when I was working in Monrovia, that I did everything but instructional services, is what I tell folks, because it is the most essential part of helping a student succeed. And we know that. So I think I'm talking to those that already know. And it's a student deserves, to be able to get to what they need to get to, whether it's access to their post-secondary options, to help and support when they have challenges with, living, just functioning kinds of things, and living in regards to family dynamics and foster care. Everyone deserves that, needs that, and it's absolutely a civil right that they should have that. And we hope that we can take that on a national basis so that becomes just the way of ways for school counseling in our schools across the nation.
Exactly. Well, it's been an honor working with you, and thank you for joining us now. And I understand you're going to stick around and moderate the panel that we have happening later as well. So you all can see there, you see Dr. Whitson with her fist up in the picture in the bottom left. We are in the trenches with each other in this movement. Another thing, in the top left picture, you see I'm there with school counselors, and we have a shirt that says, Week of Action, which today is also National Week of Action. But there, the shirt said Counselors Not Cops. And this year's Week of Action theme, hosted by Dignity in Schools, says Building Schools Our Communities Deserve Now. And with that, I actually want to pass it to a parent that we have with us who's in Long Beach Unified. She's also with the Safer LBUSD Coalition. I want to pass it to Jerlene Tatum, who's going to walk us through something that relates to this issue of counselors not cops, because last year in Long Beach, the Long Beach community was devastated when something happened, and she's going to share more about that. Jerlene? And we can end the screen share now as well. So while Jerlene's getting ready, I'll share some more context for what we're going to do today. So a year ago, in October, a young teenager by the name of Mona Rodriguez was taken off of life support after she was shot and so eventually murdered by a school safety officer in Long Beach. So we wanted to take a moment to remember Mona and to commemorate her. And we're actually joined by some school counselors that were at her high school as well. So can you all hear me? There we go.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Can't.
We can hear you.
Oh. Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Darlene. You're just a little choppy.
And I'm choppy as well. I don't know if it's my internet or the Zoom server. Yeah, a few of us are choppy, so we apologize. We're having some difficulties that may be the result of the host server and not our individual internet connections. But we still want to take this time, and it's forcing even more of this time to give that moment for Mona. So we're going to see if Jarlene is able to guide us through that. If not, I will facilitate it. And thank you all for your patience. All right. So we just want to ask people, whether you're muted, unmuted, or whatever, to just say her name, Mona Rodriguez. Mona Rodriguez.
Mona Rodriguez.
Mona Rodriguez.
Mona Rodriguez.
Mona Rodriguez.
Mona Rodriguez.
Oh no, we're sorry, Jarlene. But thank you for being here for that moment and helping to guide us through that. And thank you to all of the Long Beach community, the educators, the counselors for being there to respond after that state violence was enacted against that teenager. But we are here, we continue to do this work in her memory. And we will continue to fight to create the schools that would not allow for such violence to happen. Schools where we have our counselors to support students instead. All right, so I believe now we're going to kick off the presentation of the report. So the counselors in Long Beach Unified, the school counselors there did an amazing report that was just published and shared with the district where they looked at some of the issues we were talking about. So I want to pass it to my brother, Earl Dixon, who's in Long Beach Unified, a school counselor, to introduce himself and share some about this report.
Thank you, Amir. Over the last year, a group of counselors started meeting to come up with strategies after students returned to online learning. And there were some consistent themes that we saw, and we started putting together a report to address some of those. But before I do that, I do want to talk about the African proverb, it takes a village. So for many years growing up and as a young man and my adult life, you know, you hear people say, oh, it takes a village to raise a child. And that African proverb is very powerful, but sometimes people say that in a way to kind of negate responsibility, right? So tonight is, I would say, a true meaning of that proverb. So we have the ACLU of Southern California, Children's Defense Fund, Public Advocates, we have CAS, Dr. Loretta Whitson is here. I went to the conference, the CAS conference last Thursday and Friday, and I know that she is probably fatigued because it was packed. There's a lot of energy there. But in addition to those agencies, we have our local agency, Safe for Long Beach, thanks for coming. But then we also have, I was looking at some of my sisters and brothers from school psychologists are here. I saw some teachers and parents. And so on behalf of the school counselors, I want to thank all of you for being part of our council village. As I stated, COVID shook up the world. And one of the places that was most devastated was school counselors in terms of our work with kids in schools. One of the things that as a group, we know that counselors are the first responders, right? When students are in crisis. And so when that happened, we had counselors forming little pods throughout the city. So when the schools shut down, counselors start mobilizing, sharing resources. And so when we returned to school, that same energy continued because we saw a lot of behaviors and we knew that we were going to have to do something different. So we started meeting, we started organizing. And one of the themes that we saw in a lot of the research was that this wasn't just unique in terms of this moment, right? There was a report from 2017 with the California Department of Education that highlighted the need for more counselors. In addition to it being a local issue, we saw that there was a report by former Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan, that spoke to school counselors being a major part of a child's education, basically parallel to academic instruction. And so we took that, we looked at all of the data that was coming in from the counselors that when we did a survey, and we decided to create this document basically to make the case for developing a comprehensive school counseling program in the district. So what's significant about that is that we saw AB 2508 coming to fruition. And we knew that at some point we would be put on the front lines to implement the comprehensive school counseling program. So one of the things that we did is we took the Bible, the Ask a Bible for counselors, and we created a survey basically looking at the recommended duties, right? So we had appropriate duties for school counselors. I think it's the next slide. And we had inappropriate duties. And so these are just some samples. So we took these, created a survey, and one of the things we want to do is keep it simple. So we basically took the appropriate and inappropriate activities for school counselors, created a survey, and we were hoping to get 20 to 25%. We had over 50% of the school counselors in the district respond. So the data is really, really solid. So one of the members of the committee, Darlene Lee Wayne, will review some of the data, which is the most current data from our counselor survey.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. It's an honor to be here with all of you and to support school counselors today. I'm just speechless because this is such important work. I want to share with you the significant findings that we found in the data. Yes. So we had a total of 63 responses, and one thing that stood out is that from the data, 79.4% of school counselors we found were spending their time on non-counseling administrative testing. So lots of time, instead of utilizing the data to support students for services, they were actually spending a large chunk of their time on testing and other non-counseling duties. Next slide. Additionally, over 50%, about 55.6% of school counselors spend more than 50% of their time on non-counseling duties. So that just shows also more than half of their time here is being spent on duties that are really not counseling. 84% of school counselors spend more than 25% of their time on non-counseling duties. Okay, just gonna let you stick with that for a moment. Okay, next slide. Additionally, we also noticed that 74.6% of school counselors spent their time coordinating administrative academic functions that involve like coordinating 504 plans, SSTs, IEP meetings. Instead of advocating for students at those meetings, they were spending most of their time coordinating, scheduling, and working on those meetings to happen. Okay, next slide. And more data also showed that 61.9% of school counselors spent their time assisting with administrative duties instead of consulting with their school principal to identify and resolve student issues and needs and problem solve. Okay. We're looking at some of the most common non-counselor duties or tasks that counselors were assigned to in their district. And the highest one we saw was 84% was test coordination, followed by supervision, and then scheduling, then administrative duties, and then non-intervention discipline. Next slide. Some of the barriers that we noticed as a common trend in the survey when encountering when we serve our students was that most counselors felt that 85.7% showed that they didn't have enough time to meet with the students because a large chunk of their time was taken up by other non-counseling duties. 73% shared that they were being assigned non-counseling duties, as mentioned. 68.3% didn't have sufficient time to build rapport with the students. 54%, they didn't have enough resources and commitment, limited resources and commitment. And 34.9% was a lack of support from administration. Next slide. When asked, what would you need to do so your job can be more effective? 81% shared that they needed to decrease non-counseling duties. 77.8% shared needed to decrease student caseload. 68.3% shared that they needed to increase support from the district or the county. 52.4% needed professional development, and about 43% shared that they needed help from aides and interns with their work. So with that information, I'd like to pass it to my colleague Terrence Booth to share about the components of a comprehensive school counseling program.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for having me this evening. So I'm going to get into what are the components of a comprehensive school counseling program. So ideally, and this is based on the American School Counselor Association, the ideal caseload student to counselor ratio should be 250 to 1. School counselors spend about 80% or more of our time in direct and indirect services to students. Well, that's our goal. That's what we should be doing. So direct student services include instruction such as counseling and curriculum, appraisal and advisement. So that's more academic monitoring, counseling, doing groups and one-on-one counseling, doing academic, personal, social, and career domains. And then the indirect services are consultation, collaboration, and referrals. Next slide, please. 20% or less of school counselors' time should be focused on program planning and school support. So including reviewing school data, developing annual student outcome goals, creating classroom group and closing the gap action plans, reporting results of action plans to the school community, discussing the priorities of the school counseling program and the annual administrative conference. Next slide, please. So these were our ratios from the 21-22 school year, and our students to counselor ratios by levels. So as you can see, so our elementary student ratios average 843 to 1. Our K-8s are 799 to 1. Our middle school, 760 to 1. And our high schools are 434 to 1. And again, reminding you that the ideal caseload should be the 250 to 1 would be ideal. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I just wanted to just kind of also just briefly explain again, you know, who are school counselors. School counselors are certified. They're licensed educators who improve student access for all students by implementing a comprehensive school counseling program. And there are counselors at all levels, you know, elementary through high school, who have very different roles at different levels. So with that being said, are there any questions? Okay, if there aren't any more questions, then we're gonna move on to the next presenter.
Thank you for that, Terrence. And great information, great data that shows the many reasons why we have to reimagine school counseling, right? Having over 800 students, there's no way you can learn all those students' names. Spending over 80% of your time not on counseling is literally the opposite of what is supposed to be recommended. So with that, continuing the conversation, we're going to jump into our panel. And I want to bring back Dr. Woodson with us to moderate the panel. And we're lucky to have a panel with different components, different perspectives of the community. We have parents, students, counselors, educators, and others as well.
Yes, and are we, do we want to have them introduce who they are? So or do we know just?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's have our panelists. Could we have our panelists introduce themselves?
And maybe their role, you know.
Sure. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Darlene Lee Wang, and I'm an elementary school counselor. Pleased to be here with everyone today.
Yes, hi, and again, I'm Terrence Booth. I am a high school counselor.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Jerlene Taylor. I'm Long Beach Unified School District parent. I have 2 children currently enrolled in Long Beach.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Lilia Ocampo. Soy padre de 2 hijos.
Of 2 children in the district, Long Beach Unified School District. She's cutting up as well. Washington.
Soy la presidenta
I am president,
del CAC.
vice president of the CSA. I represent ELAC in the district. I'm also part of the English Language Advisory, Special Education.
And we also, do we have our 2 students with us? Ajay and Chuck, are you able to join us?
Hi, I'm sorry about the delay. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Ajay Patel. I'm a 12th grader at Millikan, and Mr. Booth is my counselor. Unfortunately, my camera isn't working. I'm so sorry about that. Like, is that okay?
No problem at all, Ajay. No problem at all. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And is there another student, Amir?
I'm not sure if Chuck was able to join.
Well, yes, he wasn't able to join. I think we were having some problems with the link. So I've been trying to get that information to him, but that hasn't worked for us.
Oh, no problem at all. And thank you, Terrence, for your work.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so I will, looks like we have a question here, so that I'd love to ask you all. And so the question is, how does mental health and wellness contribute to student success and well-being? And let me give you a tip for if your audio's not working, maybe if you don't show your video, that also helps, you know, if you have that, because I knew that would a few of you. So with the thumbs up, is that Jerlene? Do you want to say something, Jerlene? Or I can repeat the question. How does mental health and wellness contribute to student success and well-being?
Thank you. Are you able to hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. You can hear me? Okay, thank you. How does it translate to their success? I can speak from experience as a LBUSD. My counselor played a crucial part in my advancement in high school. And I'm not sure what the ratio was 20 something years ago when I went, but my counselor, not only did she help support me through social emotional things that were going on in my private life, she made sure that I was in the classes that I needed to be, that were best for me, best suited for me. She was an in-between between my coaches and my teachers when I had any issues. And I didn't realize until, and I had the same counselor for 3 years. So from about sophomore all the way until I graduated, she was able to support me through and all the way through filling out college application. So I would have meltdowns in her office because I did not want to fill out another application. But she knew me. She knew what my needs were. She knew what my challenges were at home. And I graduated the top 10% of my class. And when I look back, I think it was because of the support that I had from my counselor.
Wonderful, thank you. You know, I'd love to hear from AJ too, if you're available for the question.
Hi, yeah, as a student, I definitely feel as if mental health and wellness kind of have a one-on-one correlation with student success, being that like whenever I feel mentally prepared, it kind of gives me the confidence to like tackle the day. So I definitely feel as if mental health and wellness should be prioritized, especially when looking at like a large pool of students.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up to anyone else that would like to speak to this.
Well, I mean, I'd like to say, speaking, you know, as a school counselor, I mean, yeah, mental health and wellness definitely, that definitely makes a difference, you know. But these are things sometimes, and I think post, you know, the post pandemic, you know, when we, you know, a lot of kids have come back and you know they have been experiencing a lot of mental health issues. It's been really hard for them to readjust after being out of school for you know a year and a half. You know, trying to learn on Zoom. You know, so you have you know a lot of students who were experiencing they're experiencing anxiety. You know, some kids were, I think, for them being home for so long, they were experiencing you know depression. You know, when they came back to us, there were so many other things that were preventing them from you know just kind of jumping back into you know into the school you know the rhythm of things. You know, so before before you expect them to get in, you know, come into class and you know learn, you know, you have to help them to get to the root of the problem, the things that are preventing them from being successful, and help them to address those issues.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on. We have 5 questions, so.
Sí, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
¿Puedo proseguir?
Can I continue?
You know, is it Lilia?
Lilia?
Can you say what you,
Lilia?
I don't speak Spanish, so I just would want to give you an opportunity to speak. So, okay, I'll move on to the next question.
¿En español? ¿En español?
Do we have
Yes.
someone that can
It's
interpret for her?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We do. So,
Can
yes,
you hear me?
please.
Can you hear
Hi,
me?
Dr. Whitson. Dr. Whitson, you need to choose
you
the
hear me?
English interpretation channel to hear the interpreter, Lilia, or Ileana.
Oh, I see. Okay. But if she speaks, we can't hear what she said.
Can you
Yeah,
hear me?
she is interpreting in the English channel. If you choose interpretation at the bottom, then choose English, you'll be able
So
to hear
we
Ileana.
can- So if she's speaking, then the yellow box will be lit up and I'll just be quiet. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Oh, okay, because I haven't used that service. So the second question is, it's very mindful. My grandson, he's now a junior, but in his sophomore year, I said, why haven't you seen your counselor? He wanted to be in the International Baccalaureate program and sports and things like that, had good grades. And he goes, I just don't want to bother her. She's so busy. So anyway, so that just leads into this question. What are some of the challenges encountered in accessing counseling services and mental health supports? And I'll just open up to anyone who would like to respond to that.
Sure, I can respond to that. When I was hearing your story, Dr. Whitson, that just kind of breaks my heart, because I can relate also, as feeling like I'm wearing so many hats as a school counselor, but I do my best to try to meet my students' needs and try to prioritize them because they are the priority, right? We want to make sure that they know that and that they feel safe here at school. The challenges for me, definitely the ratios, as we had seen earlier on the screen, is that when we are faced with 2 to 5 times more than the recommended ratio, we're talking about like 500 and up, it's very, very difficult to meet all of our students' needs, right? And give them the time, attention, patience, and understanding and support that they need and that they deserve. I think another piece to it is that, with the duties that we are expected to do as school counselors, that it's not aligned with our counseling duties. It makes it very challenging having to juggle so many different tasks and trying to meet compliance and deadlines and testing, and on top of trying to prioritize what's really important is our students. So.
Yes, and definitely again working with high school students. I mean, I hear that all the time too. Students will come and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry to bother you." I'm like, "No, it's no bother. You're not bothering me." But I know some of our challenges that we do face, in our district with our high schools is that we're not as easily accessible to our students because we are expected to perform other, again, not counseling related duties. So during the times when the kids are available, like during their lunchtime, before school, after school, we're required to provide school supervision, instead of being available to meet with our kids. And then it's difficult to call them during class time because obviously, we don't want to interrupt instruction time, because they need to be in class. So we are finding it a bit challenging to be able to meet with our students. Today I was outside and one of my students approached me while I was doing supervision, and we just had a conversation, outside. We just talked, he had some questions about some things, and so we had to, we stood there and talked about it. So you have to be able to, to try and create those opportunities to form those connections and establish that rapport with your students, to the best of, at least to the best of your ability.
I agree with you. And is it Lily? I'm going to call on you, and I just want to know what your experiences have been with you and your family, your children.
Sobre la primera pregunta.
The first question, going back to it, or the second one? Well, the challenges that we've been facing to have access to counseling. It's to begin with at the school sites. like at my son's school, there's a counselor for 1,000 students. Recently, they told us in a meeting, during the DLAC meeting, will they give us this information? That's the first challenge. It's an enormous amount of students, right? 4 times more of what is recommended. On top of this, the agencies that provide these services also don't facilitate. Perhaps they don't have enough staff, but it's really difficult to find these services if you're not directed or guided by someone, right? A counselor, or if you try to access in your own, it's really difficult. I had to do so many phone calls to be able to get that support for one of my sons. So it's a process that sometimes takes too long. And I was able to get that support for one of my sons. Another challenge is that when you have access the first time, be able to understand why the expectations, how they get a support. I think it's really necessary to include the rest of the family, because if the child, the student being affected, it's like just looking at the top of the iceberg. And I think the whole family might be sometimes affected by certain things that are happening at the home. So consider all of that. And there's not that connection sometimes, because I have tried receive that kind of service that it's more comprehensive. It's been really difficult. So I'm trying right now to get that kind of support for the whole family. And that's why one of the challenges too. And also the agencies, many times their work, I suppose, is to help precisely those families that need that help. But sometimes what happens, and that is a problem, and that's the reason why many parents don't call or seek enough information, because there's been experiences where a social worker is sent to the home or a police officer is sent to the home, so the families many times see this as a threat instead of a way to support the families. I've known many families who have received police presence in the middle of the night. So that's not support. That actually brings more trauma. It increases the problems, the mental health problems and issues at the home. So it would be a good idea to have that intention, right? To focus and find what is the need of the family and the student, right? Because that's the priority with the counselors.
Yes.
And the majority of the times, based on the parents that I have talked to, this is not happening. She cut off a little bit, but she said thank you.
Gracias for your remarks. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Looking at our time, what I'd like to do is just, we have 2 more questions. And so I'll go to the next question for you, which is, what needs to change to better meet the mental health and wellness needs of students? I'll answer that. Ratios need to be lowered, and then I'll let you guys go from there. So whatever you would like to say, what else needs to be changed? Terrence or Darlene?
Sure. Wanted to give someone else an opportunity. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Ratios need to change. The priority and understanding and importance of school counseling and mental health needs to change too. We have to recognize that these are different times, especially with the pandemic. We're seeing lots and lots of needs of students who need counseling. They need additional support. And if we don't put our priorities, in the right place, right? If we're putting counselors to make them do duties such as testing, 504s, IEPs, and so on, we're not going to get to support our students to help them meet their needs and go beyond what they can accomplish, right? Because counseling, that's what we do. We ignite, like, the possibilities for the students. They might not know what they're capable of yet, but we're there to support them, uplift them, encourage them, and then give them, those opportunities, provide them the resources so they can make it to where they need to go.
Mhm. Thank you.
Yes, and then also, like I saw in the chat, one of my colleagues mentioned that the duties, that has to change to allow us to effectively do our job and to really make a difference. So a lot of those non-counseling duties that that we're expected to do, that has to change. Also to give us that time to work and provide those direct and indirect services to our students.
Mhm. Wonderful. Thank you. I'd love to have AJ say a few words.
Hi, yeah, I definitely think that awareness around what counselors provide needs to be expressed. Like, for instance, students kind of consider them just to be people that help us get into college or fill out applications, but really, I think everyone needs to understand that they're people that you could talk to and rely on for emotional support, as well as all of the academic services that they provide.
Thank you so much. This is remindful of, we're talking about reimagining school counseling. So I've had the pleasure of being able to go to a lot of different states and see what school counseling is, but one that struck me was in Baltimore. And when I went into their office, it was actually when I went into the counseling offices, and that was my purpose. I was visiting the schools, and they were working with Harvard to improve their counselor delivery. So that was my interest. But each counselor, each school psychologist, each nurse had a low ratio, like 250 or whatever the ratio is for them, or in the ballpark range of that, but they also had one full-time assistant for each person too. So I can tell you that I felt a little bit depressed after that was over. And that was probably, Obama was in office, so it was 10 years ago or so. And look, I mean, we've come far, but having structures where some of this work can be done, where you have assistants that are doing the things that are administrative tasks and stuff like that, would certainly be a wonderful next step for the school counseling profession. So anyway, with that, let me ask the final question. And it says, what role do you want to see counselors play in creating a safe and supportive school?
And I see Lilia has her hand up too. I don't know if
and then we'll go to Jerlene after Lilia. Okay.
Sí,
Yes.
Los roles de los
The role of should be precisely guiding the students
que tienen
who have sometimes problems or issues with other students who are defiant. Sometimes there's discipline of getting, in trouble, but there's not positive implementation and support, right? I don't see that support and guidance, and to have also enough staff that can help with these needs that are actually affecting the students, instead of utilizing other negative discipline practices. Give them tools, right, resources, so they can actually be able to solve their own problems many times, and be able to also feel better. That mental health component is really important, right? Sometimes they need guidance so they can actually move forward and take advantage of what sometimes schools can, are giving. When a student has a clear mind, they can take better decisions and they can learn better. So that it's really important. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. And then turning it over to Jerlene.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay. let's try this again. As a parent, and when earlier on it was mentioned Mona Rodriguez, and when we heard of this tragic incident, many of us were wondering, how are our students being responded to? Are their needs being met? Is someone talking to them? Is someone checking in just to make sure they're okay? Because we know that some of them saw this, and the impact of that trauma, I mean, it was beyond our students, it was our families, it was our community. And for those of us who've been involved in LBUSD, we are aware that there's a lack of counselors. We are our children. And so we immediately, one of our first asks when we formed, it was a collaborative group of stakeholders that came together, organizations, parents, community members that came together to form Safe for LBUSD. And one of the first things that we asked was that proper support was provided to those students at the school that was in proximity of this incident. Honestly, I don't know if that was ever provided for them. And that was something that still, we're advocating for, because when we think about a safer LBUSD, the social emotional well-being of our students is that's part of being safe. They have to not only feel safe, they need to feel heard. And I'm still wondering, my son, I was a child that now attends Milliken High School, and that was the school that the incident took place. So I often wonder about how many of his older peers endured that, and what are the conversations around that. And every time I see a school safety officer or I see a police officer, I wonder what kind of trauma is triggered for them. And I wonder, is anyone talking to them about it? And if so, who would that be? We would think that would be the role of a counselor. That's if counselors are allowed to do what they have been trained to do, what they have gone to school to do. I'm thankful for the counselor that helps get my child's schedule together. I'm thankful for that. But what about the other needs? So thinking about what is necessary, and even thinking about safe, having an outlet for our youth and our children. And to be honest, some of our children comes from homes where there's not an opportunity for them to communicate with a supportive adult. And I grew up in one of those homes. So I think that having counselors, again, that can be there to counsel and console our young people is very important, because that may be the lifeline for them that basically saves their life.
Julian, let me personally thank you for all the work that you've done in advocating for the students via the school counseling profession. That really means a lot to me, to know that you're there. And I know it does. Sometimes parents can say, things we can't say, because it seems when we're advocating for ourselves, it's like we're being selfish because we want, but it's not that.
So I want to extend something to you all that are on here. So thank you for doing that. You all have to let us know what you need. Counselors and those who are working directly with our children, they have to tell us how we can be of support, because we all want the best for our children, but we don't know how to advocate for you if we don't know what your needs are. So as a parent that's out here in the movement, that's communicating with other parents, let us know how we can come and support you.
Great. I know they're going to take you up on that. So, and they should. That's wonderful. So I see Kennedy Dixon, his hand is raised.
Yes, actually, I was just going to take her up on that. I think one of the challenges for us as counselors, and I think that when we think of therapists and we think of social workers, I think that the water's been muddied a little bit, right? And so when we think of like the wellness centers, and we think of, we have school-based mental health collaborative, one of the reasons that we wrote the report is to differentiate what counselors do, right? So you have therapists who work with a small group of children that have a medical necessity, right? That's why they're receiving therapy, a small group. You have social workers who do pretty much the same thing, but they coordinate services. Counselors are professional educators, right? So we guide them through the academics, the social emotional, all the way into the career. And one of the challenges that we have is that when students leave elementary to middle to high school, there's no vertical articulation, right? There's not that conversation that's built on a common document showing that when students leave 5th grade into middle school, these are the competencies that they will have. And when they move from middle school into high school, these are the competencies they should have, right? And so what happens is there's this disconnect. And, you know, it's when we were doing this work, there's no debate here, right? So we looked at the SCORE report from the University of Massachusetts. They looked at 117 different studies, right? The SC Research, 50 different studies. And even the 2017 report from the California Department of Education looked at 32 studies. So there's 199 studies. And in a report, what we say is that developing a comprehensive school counseling program is imperative. The kids deserve it and they need it. And so we will be taking you up on meeting with you so that we can kind of move forward to this. And I'll just give a shout out to Dr. Whitson. I was at the conference last week, Thursday and Friday, and you know, just the collaboration at the tables when I was walking around with all the counselors and the energy. And the other thing is looking at Southern California school districts that for many years, we were told, oh, you guys are lucky to be counselors in Long Beach because a lot of school districts don't have counselors. Well, that's not true anymore. Because Santa Ana went from 60 to over 200 counselors over the last couple of years. Garden Grove, same thing. So we see this trend happening, this trajectory of student support services. But as we talk about mental health, the idea of the counselor is not to provide therapy, but we're the first responders to be able to coordinate and facilitate all of those services that we know that those kids need. And so that's kind of where I want to give Terrence and Darlene, David Echeverria was also part of Shandi McGee and Rima Hassan. That was the core group that put the document together, the Reimagining School Counseling in the Long Beach Unified School District. And again, I want to thank everyone for joining our little counselors village. We appreciate it.
Mhm. Well, that was really impactful, Kennedy. Does anyone else want to respond to Kennedy, or is there anyone that has a hand up? Because I do have something to say. Okay, Terrence, go ahead.
Yeah, so I did want to respond to Ms. Tatum's her comments regarding the situation, the incident at Milliken. I am that's my site. I work there, so I was very, very close to that situation because the student who she came to fight was my student. So so there was still the after effect. How this girl witnessed everything. She was right there, so she witnessed everything that happened, and so me as her counselor, I mean, it was really tough. This was a new situation. This was uncharted territory, for me, as a counselor. But then, I had other students, that very next day, who, they were coming to us. They were coming to the counselors, saying, "Oh, I witnessed this," or there were students who actually recorded the incident, so they saw it, they were sharing it. So it was really spreading, across the campus. And just let me say that it was a very overwhelming experience for me as a counselor, because my student was at times, she was receiving threats, death threats, as if it were her fault that this situation happened, and so now my job is to try and keep my students safe. She didn't feel safe coming to school, because people were going on social media, and so there was just so many different things that were going on. And like I said, I mean, it was definitely definitely an experience, and for us to try and comfort our kids, because so many kids were just they were just shaken up over the entire incident.
Sure. Thank you.
May I just tell you,
Yes.
thank you for sharing, and thank you for letting us know that our students were not alone.
Mhm. I am
Yeah.
very hopeful. Yeah, I'm very hopeful. I'm hopeful for Long Beach. I'll start there, so I'm hopeful for the 1,000+ school districts in California and for the students, the 6 million students we serve. 3.5 years ago, I was in Tony Thurman, State Superintendent of Public Instruction's office with school psychs, social workers, nurses, CWA folks. All of these folks were there. And what was historic about that, and I shared this at the conference, what was historic is that we've never been in a state superintendent's office. So that was first. And when we got there, he says, "You are my people," because he used to be a social worker. So that was wonderful. And then as we talked for maybe half an hour towards the end of the conversation, he said, "What do you need?" And he turns to me, and I happen to know him because of other things he was an assemblyman and worked with him in different ways. So he turns to me, and I thought, I have never been asked that question by anyone in that kind of, what do we really, really need? And I said, we need 10,000 more school counselors. And his response was, well, let's get started. So with that, this is why these conversations are so dang important for all of us to just hear and work together. We can't do it alone. Like in that meeting, we're all together and we began working on it. We got things passed. This year, we've got more school counselors working in our schools. We got money for scholarships for people to go into the school counseling profession, $20,000, and they're getting them already. So those are things that are going to help us tremendously. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Michael Ball and Nicole Ochi to close out this wonderful event.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Whitson and all of our panelists. You all were so amazing to hear about your experiences and your stories and just all the amazing work you do every day. To our counselors and our parents and our students, thank you for all that you do. Michael, could you put up the screen real quick? Oh, sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Nicole Ochi. My pronouns are she, her. I'm with Public Advocates. And together with Michael, we both do a lot of support work here in Long Beach with parents, students, and grassroots organizations. We help support the Long Beach Education Connection on budget advocacy, say for LBUSD, and some of the counselors here. So here are the 4 recommendations that we want to bring forward towards the decision makers in Long Beach Unified. Many of them have been identified already, but these are sort of collective recommendations or demands to reimagine school counseling in Long Beach that we worked on as community folks and counselors. And so number 1 is to commission an independent study of student support services that really hones down on ratios by school site to identify inequities and also examines counselors' duties during the school year. Number 2 is to really implement a district-wide comprehensive school counseling program that adheres to that awesome new law that Dr. Whitson and her team at the California Association of School Counselors was able to pass this year. So to really do that here in Long Beach and make sure that those really disturbing numbers that were shared by the counselors in terms of 85% of counselors spending more than 25% of their time on administrative duties, that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable for them or our kids or our families. And so really asking the district to change that. Number 3, something everyone has mentioned here, making sure we hire more counselors to get closer to that recommended ratio, and to make that possible by increasing funding in general, and also by divesting from armed school safety officers and reinvesting those funds into counselors and other positive supports. And finally, to prioritize hiring Black counselors and to engage with the community, with all of you on a quarterly basis on these issues. So with that, I will pass it over to Michael.
Thank you, Nicole. And yes, everybody, hi, my name is Michael. I'm with Children's Defense Fund California. And like Nicole said, we do a lot of work in Long Beach supporting the counselors and a couple other people. So Yes, as follow-up to the demands, and thank you all for sitting through this webinar and listening to everything that the counselors had to share, from their report to all the work that is being done. We do call on you to take a few action steps to support reimagining counseling in Long Beach Unified. We've started a petition that y'all can sign a pledge in support of, and the counselors' demands, and the demands will be repeated there. And there are links to the full counselors' report as well if you're interested in reading more. And if you have any other questions, if you want to get involved, if you want any more information, you can contact me at mball@childrensdefense.org for further information. And now I will share with y'all a video that the counselors prepared for everyone.
I don't think we hear the audio.
Did you say you can't hear it?
Yeah,
I think it might.
with the
Okay.
share setting.
We'll try one more time, and I'll try it over. I might have headphones in, so that might be why.
Or we still can't hear it.
All right, I'm sorry that you can't hear it, but I'll share it in the chat then.
So thank you again, everyone, for coming. Please do sign the petition in the chat. And I don't want to have the last word here. So I am going to ask someone else, maybe Earl, maybe Darlene, maybe Terrence, someone to close us out with, with some words. Oh, but sorry, before you do that, I do want to acknowledge the folks that you can't really see who have been supporting and helping with this. I want to thank Ileana, who has been interpreting and had translated the slide deck, to Fatima for taking notes, for Sumit for all her help on the comm side, to Victor from the ACLU for doing everything in the chat. Sorry if I forgot someone, but I do want to acknowledge all the unseen labor that happens behind the scenes. So I'll hand it over to you, Earl, if you want to close us out.
I'm truly humbled. Again, we talk about it takes a village, and I totally want to thank everyone for being here. But Terrence, is the student still here? Is he still with us?
Let's see. Ajay, are you still there? I can't see him on here.
Okay, that's okay, because I was gonna give him the honor of doing that, because it's the kids that we do this for. But anyway,
We do have one student, Anaya, who joined us. I was told I can add her if she's.
Oh, beautiful. Yes.
Anaya, if you're able to share. And thank you so much, Janae, for sharing. And Anaya, I don't want to put you on the spot, because I also just saw that you signed and shared the petition as well. So thank you for doing that. But if you want to share any final words, and you don't have to come on camera or anything, but just from that student perspective.
Hi, I didn't know, like, I knew that we had counselors for a reason, but I thought that when we changed, like, from elementary school to middle school to high school, that the job changed, like the duties of being a counselor changed. But I think that through the presentations that I saw today, that they're still the same, and there's just a million things being added, and there's more people, and so, like, it makes the job harder, and it loses, and it's lost focus. And, like, I think that this really, it made me see that as for like the counselors at our schools, since their job is hard and it's like a lot of work, like they aren't able to talk to everyone. I talk to my counselor kind of sometimes, but it is more like of just things that are administrative more than, you know, just talking to her and like having a conversation with her about anything. So I think that this is like something that can really help, and I do like want to keep going with it, and I want to see like where it goes even after I graduate. Oh, I'm sorry, I go to McBride and I'm a senior.
Thank you. And did we say your name right? Anaya?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you, Anaya, for joining us. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing the petition. And thank you for being our inspiration to do this work, because we truly believe that students like you deserve that support and everything you need to prosper in school. So great work, and congrats, class of 2023.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, with that, I believe we can call this a conclusion. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you to all of the partners, you know, Children's Defense Fund, Public Advocates for Leading, ACLU, we just joined, CASC, you know, Safer LBUSD. Thank you to all of our parents and the communities. I see David from Books Not Buckets, a great nonprofit in Long Beach serving youth. So thank you to the village. We really appreciate you. Thank you to Sumit for providing great comm support throughout everything as well. Have a great evening, y'all.